Max, is the live stream all set? If not, we can figure it out next week. But I'm just curious if that was ever squared away. If not, no worries.
I just clicked the button and it appears to be working.
Okay, excellent. Perfect. Thank you, Max.
Susan, the meeting ID should be at the end of the link that you joined in with. The other way to access it is, you would think I would remember how to do that with Zoom. I'm gonna copy, oh, Brandy already copied and pasted it in the chat. So if you want to just grab it from there, you can join that way. We will be setting up either a passcode or require an authorization. We're going to play around with that. And then we'll probably make that change for next week. So that way we can disable the waiting room. But we're still playing around with that and kind of figuring that out. So for now, feel free to use that meeting ID and that link. Dana is running a few minutes late, but is on her way.
Cool. So it looks like we have mostly everyone here. Just one quick announcement, Max, and then I'll hand it over to you for whenever you want to kick off here. I sent a note in the Slack channel earlier today, just regarding a tour / onboarding for Common Space. So if you did express interest in taking advantage of that free membership, there is a tour queued up right now for this Friday, the 19th at 5 p.m. So if you could just do me a huge favor when you have a moment, if you're able to make that time, again, if you express interest in that membership, just because they want to make sure that you know how to use the facility, so that you know how to get into the building, all that good stuff. So if you can just answer that poll whenever you're able to. If you can't swing that date in time, we'll set up another tour for next week. But if you don't mind, if you express interest, just head over to Slack right now in the CIC-students-C2 channel and just vote on that poll if that time works. And we'll circle back with Joe, who will be your point of contact, and we'll get you all squared away with your Common Space memberships.
We're going to do a quick poll using the reactions feature in Zoom. Give a thumbs up if you've managed to get Slack installed on your computer and you're all in, or use the open mouth reaction if you're still got to get that set up.
Say those programs again, please.
Yeah, if you have Slack installed on your computer, give a thumbs up. Otherwise, use the open mouth reaction.
Yeah, it looks like I saw 3 folks, I think.
So if you guys want to stick around tonight after class, we can definitely help you get that set up. We'll be posting some pretty important announcements through Slack. We try to use Slack over email just because that's what a lot of the workforce is going to, and it allows for more real-time communication. So definitely an important tool that we want to get that set up for you guys. So if you want to stick around after class, or feel free to shoot me an email and we can set up another time to get it working. My email is max, M-A-X, @mzmtech.com. It is also, that email is in the Google Classroom Drive under Module 1. There's a Google Doc in there for the entire module, and I've got my contact information in there as well. So feel free to stick around and we'll make sure that you got Slack set up. And I'll post my email in the chat as well in case anyone finds it easier to jot it down from there.
Cool. Thanks, Max. That was all I had for announcements on my end. I'm going to drop in just a minute here. So whenever you're ready to kick off, Max, go for it.
Cool. So in trying to stay in line with stand-up and project management and kind of real world development, I'm going to kick class off with a stand-up. So let's talk about what we covered yesterday. Does anyone want to jump in and kind of give a summary of what you learned yesterday, or a part that you liked, or anything like that?
I'll talk. We went over all the kind of different roles you can have in tech, and I personally found that helpful because I see these things everywhere. You see project management and all these things, and I have no idea what any of it means. And I found that really super helpful as like a base for what people are even talking about when they say these things.
Absolutely. Anything else that we covered yesterday that stuck in your minds?
Reaction.
Oops. Look ahead.
You go ahead.
Oh, thanks. I found it helpful when you talked about the frustration level while learning how to do this and going along the path of becoming a web developer. I found that very helpful. And I do have my rubber duck.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad to hear it. Anyone else want to chime in? Yeah, so you guys covered.
I really
Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I really like also the brainstorming exercise you started the course with, where, I was able to learn of different career paths out there as I'm shifting my career. And, that was really good. And some I knew, some I didn't. And also regarding that, that discovery point, say it right, where a programmer always has to discover a solution. I've been the user for so many years in my career and got frustrated with IT people and saying, this thing isn't working, fix it. And they have that little huddle talk. And I got so frustrated in like seconds and say, don't they know their system? So now I understand a little bit more behind the scenes of what they're being innovative to try to help me. And a lot of users don't see that or know that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a great
So true.
a great book called A Year Without Pants. And it's about a guy who gets hired to work at WordPress, which is one of the largest content management system platforms out there. And one thing that WordPress was doing at the time he was hired is they required all engineers to work 1 day a year on help desk. And they had full-time people set up to run the help desk. But that is one thing that they required. And they would get through like 8 or 10 tickets a day and go, man, this is tough. How do you guys do this? And they'd come back and go, you did 8 tickets in a day? I do 8 tickets every 30 minutes. But help desk is definitely something that is an art form. And hopefully along the course of the program, you're able to pick up how we're teaching it and hopefully can use that communication style and bring it into customers that you may be supporting.
Right.
Yeah. It's the teach one, help one, do one model that we're hoping to follow with the project-based curriculum.
And what's unfair for IT help desk professionals is that they have no time and they have to like fix the world. And I see the gap there of like, when they're actually right at work trying to fix the problem, the user doesn't understand anything of their job, but yet the user it creates a bias. And
Absolutely.
The user is talking about the IT professionals and all that, and they don't know that they got to work right then and there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. So that's I think you guys hit all the main points of what we covered yesterday. So today the agenda is, and I'm sorry, I'm looking off at my second monitor. If you guys have the opportunity to get a second monitor, I caution you with it, because once you get one, you're never able to work without a second monitor again. So be very, very careful when you do decide to make that leap. But you'll find in the professional development world, a lot of developers tend to work with 2 or even 3 different monitors, so they can have a lot of information up at the same time. And so we'll kind of start to get into that, and you guys will feel that as you become full stack developers. When you get started, there are really only two screens that you need to have open at the same time. But as you become more and more of a full stack developer and learn different technologies, you'll find there's a lot more information that you're able to take in, and you just need the screen space to display it all.
Ariel had her hand raised for a question.
Sure, shoot.
Ariel, take yourself off of mute.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, no, it wasn't a question. I appreciated the imposter syndrome portion, because that was my biggest issue with any coding before, is I would get stuck there for 2 hours, stuck on that one section. And I appreciated the tip about the whiteboard. Like, that was a big thing for me, because there's Post-its covering my whole work area, and I never even thought to do that. So that was helpful. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for chiming in. I know it was a pivotal point for Karen to figure out a whiteboard, and excuse me. You see a lot of tech shows or movies where like there are whiteboards everywhere all over offices. And then that is one accurate thing that they get is sometimes it is easier to get your brain out on a whiteboard than it is to get it into code. And so that's a very important intermediary step. And so whatever works for you, whether it's the Post-its, whether it's a notebook, whether it's a whiteboard, we and our company have had long debates over whether to use a legal pad or a spiral bound notebook. And it was amazing how people could fill an entire hour on that hill they were willing to die on of a spiral bound notebook is the way to go. And yes, it did change our ordering practices where we now had to offer employees the option of which one they wanted to buy. So definitely great tips to share. And thank you, Karen and Dana, for chiming in there as well. So you may notice throughout the course of the program, we'll actually have a couple students jump back into the course. Most of them will be as TAs. But we'll definitely have a couple people, if you don't recognize their names, feel free to jump in chat and say, hey, by the way, who is this person? And I'm sure they'll be happy to introduce themselves. Awesome. Anything else from yesterday's class? All right.
Oh,
go ahead, Corey.
Shoot, am I unmuted?
You are.
So if I got it right, the Google Classroom is like the syllabus?
No, there should be a separate document. That is one thing that I forgot to go over yesterday because we ran out of time. So we'll be doing that in today's class, and we'll make sure that everyone has access to the syllabus and curriculum and all of that stuff.
I was trying to make sure I did all my homework. Right?
No problem. Yes, there was one question that I left in the homework as a little surprise, as the what frameworks and what languages are we learning? We'll be sure to cover that tonight. Don't worry, no one's going to lose points over the answer or anything like that. All right, so in stand-up form, the second question is, what are we planning on doing today? Carolyn, did you have a question?
Too many buttons to push. Yeah, just while we were still on the what we did yesterday kind of thing, I was just going to say the thing that really means a lot to me is, first of all, no programmer exists alone. It is you may spend a lot of time by yourself with your computer, but it is a community team, reach out, group think kind of thing, and not just like with your colleagues right there, but through Google, of course. We allow that now. But it's just, the whole, and that's how librarianship is too. It's a very team oriented. I don't know what the answer is, but I know how to find it, or I don't know how to find it. Let me ask my colleague who has worked with that. And it's just, it's obvious, but it's nice that we've talked about that, because that's one of the things about the profession that really appeals to me.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's it. That's
it.
Yep.
Thanks for sharing.
Oh, no.
Okay, so for class today, we're going to start with kind of open up the floor to kind of throw out any questions you have out there, anything that from yesterday's lesson that you weren't quite sure about, anything that you saw on the news today that you just think would be an interesting discussion point. We'll open up the floor for about 5-10 minutes, see if anyone has things to throw out there. From there, we're going to go back to that job title list that we came up with yesterday. And I'm just going to do a quick couple-minute breeze through on what job titles careers in code match up with closest. So, you know, out of that long list of all those different things we covered, unfortunately, the program won't train you to be all of those on the list, but there are definitely a couple on there that I want to highlight and kind of start focusing you in towards. Just so that when you start the job search with Laura, you'll have an idea of what titles you're looking for. Corey, you have a question? Okay.
No, I'm going on to what you want to talk about, the topic, right?
Yeah.
A discussion topic. Yeah, you mentioned yesterday about we were talking about like iCloud security, you know, and you know, I was really thinking about that afterwards and saying, you know, with the whole Russian controversy, you know, is there an increase in cyber security jobs now, or?
Absolutely. You know? Yeah, there are. It is hard to find a tech job on that list that is not growing at a rapid rate. And the pandemic has definitely accelerated that. There are now career opportunities even at the military level for cybersecurity and defense. In fact, President Obama set up a separate section of the military for cybersecurity, knowing that that would be a major concern in future wars. And so cybersecurity, definitely a growing industry. I don't have the stats on it directly. And however, that is definitely something, while our program is going to focus on cybersecurity as a developer, so kind of thinking about ways that you can store passwords securely or make sure user data isn't accessible or run some tests to make sure that your code is secure. We'll be approaching it from the developer angle. However, there is a whole separate career out there for security. There are penetration testers that they call them white hat or black hat penetration testers. White hats are the people who are testing for good and come in and try and report any security vulnerabilities. And then there is also black hat hackers who are the ones you hear about on the news who go in. Ransomware is a new term that's come out in the past couple of years. People stealing data and refusing to give it back unless there is a payment for them. And so black hat tends to be those unethical hackers. And so definitely a growing field. I like to think that all technology or all you can go to any kind of problem or any kind of question. There's always the forward thinking way of, let me take that question, break down the question enough and get to the answer. But sometimes, and this is very true with your code, sometimes you just don't know how to get from the question to the answer. So sometimes you have to work in reverse, right? Sometimes you have to go, well, let me start with the end, or let me think let me estimate where it's going to end, and then try and make my way back up to the question. And so security, you can often take the same approach. So you can start at the code and think, okay, how can I layer protection onto this code to make it secure? The other way of thinking about security is, let me start as the end user and start poking around until I get down to that code level and figure out where the vulnerabilities are there. So that's a long-winded answer, and I think I saw some questions pop up in the chat.
I can go ahead and read those if you want.
Sure.
LaTanya had a question. She said, can you give insight into ethical hacking and its correlation, if any, to cybersecurity? And does that ransom stuff happen to everyday people?
Absolutely. So let me start with the easier question. Ransomware can happen to anybody. There's this idea out there that Macs cannot get viruses. And that unfortunately is becoming less and less true. Based off of the architecture of the Windows operating system, Windows to this day is still MS-DOS based. And so when you think of MS-DOS, you think of that black screen with the blinking white cursor. That is MS-DOS. And to this day, all the way up until Windows 10, it is still based off of MS-DOS. So everything that you're doing in the operating system is translating to something on that DOS level. So when you think about why are these computers so insecure, it's because all of the vulnerabilities going all the way back to DOS are still present on modern day PCs. Apple Apple is not a shining beacon. Apple is based off of Linux. And Linux is part of a open source software community where people can come in, developers can contribute code and make it better. So Apple has a newer base to their operating system and is able to layer in more security features because they control not just the software, but also the hardware level. So Apple was one of the first companies, major companies, to roll out hardware level hard drive encryption. So you're in all the files sitting on your computer are something called encrypted at rest, which means that while they're sitting there, while they're resting there, they are encrypted. And when you turn on your computer, it doesn't give you access to those files until you type in your password. The operating system boots up and unlocks all of those for you. So ransomware is something that can affect anyone. Ransomware, I would say, is a specific type of virus. And it is using encryption against you. So what it does is it goes in, it backs up all of your files to the ransomer's servers, and then it encrypts all the files and says, we're not giving you access to this until you pay us. And when you pay us, we'll unencrypt all of those files for you. So the most effective method against ransomware is backup. And you're going to hear that drilled into your head over and over and over again, is always back up everything on your computer. And so that's something that we'll be talking about probably on Thursday, is how to organize your code in a way that makes it easy to back it up. That was a long rant. As for ethical hacking and correlation to cybersecurity, there are two definitions behind hacking, right? So you hear Upstate has these biannual hackathons, right? And you think hacking, hackathon, that must be security, right? Well, the original definition of a hacker was someone who kind of took different pieces of code and kind of shoved them all together and kind of just made it work, right? It wasn't the individual or the initial intent to make that code work that way, but they hacked it together to work. And so unfortunately, the media industry has taken that term hacking that became popular in the 80s and 90s and applied it to this negative connotation of hackers. Oh, they're breaking in, they're security, they're stealing your data, they're a virus, right? And that unfortunately is not the initial definition of hacking, but it is something that you'll hear in the media. So I proudly use the title hacker because that's how I approach everything. Tell me what your problem is. I'm going to cobble together something that hopefully will solve your problem. And that's what hacking means to me. However, the industry has taken over this term hacking to mean, oh, cybersecurity and breaking into things and viruses. So it's important to know both definitions. And kind of take it with a grain of salt. When you hear someone is a hacker, you'll rarely hear someone introduce themselves as a hacker. You'll hear them introduce themselves as a cybersecurity tester or a penetration tester or something like that.
Can I jump in? So I actually got an email, which I believe was a phishing email, and they said, hey, we have your information. It's bad news for you. And so I deleted it because I was like, I'm sure I don't have anything you can ransom. But I just wonder if the fact that I didn't go into that email and start clicking stuff helped me, because ultimately as far as I know. They didn't get any of my information.
Yeah,
Like, I'm just wondering if I had clicked on anything, would that have activated something? Like if they didn't have my info, now they do?
not it depends on your computer. That's a very long answer. Security experts will use multiple different attacks on you. One of which is phishing, just to acquire information about you that they can then use against you, right? So they may not have any information at the time on you, but they may say, hey, you changed your Google account. If this wasn't you, click here to change your password back. And you think, oh, okay, yeah. And you click on that email and you type in your email address and your password and you hit submit, and they go, oh, okay, great, you're all fine. Well, you may have clicked on that link, and instead of taking you to google.com, it took you to goggle.com, where you just entered your information. Now they have your password. Now they can use that to reset passwords on other sites. So phishing is definitely one attack approach. For the most part, opening an email on its own is not going to open you up to a security threat. Opening an attachment or a link is when you're going to start running into problems. But for the most part, opening an email on its own is not going to open you up to an attack vector. Okay. I'm going to cap it there for tonight, just because I want to make sure we have enough time for the other topics. One promise that I will make, though, is if any night we end before 8:30, I will gladly open the room back up to any news articles you may have seen, or any other further questions that you have. I can't make any promises, because if you haven't been able to tell, I love to talk, and I'll probably push it right up to 8:30. But I promise to open the floor back up if we do end up ending early. So what's on the docket for tonight? We're going to go through that job title list again very quickly, and kind of just highlight the job titles that are going to be closest to what the Careers in Code curriculum is. And then we're going to hop into the syllabus. We'll make sure everyone has access to the syllabus and go through module by module and just do a quick run through of what we're teaching. We are then going to do a diagram activity on how the internet works. It's going to be a high level, and I'm hoping to use my iPad to kind of give you a visual representation of how the internet works. So apologies in advance for my terrible handwriting. We are then hopefully going to take a quick break after that. And when we come back, we're going to do just what we did yesterday for job titles, except we're going to do it for languages. So this is an opportunity to throw out any acronyms you have heard, or any programming languages or frameworks or plugins, or all of these things that you've heard developers talk about and you have no idea what it actually is. We're going to go in and kind of break that down into different categories. And that should be our night for tonight. Any questions before we dive in? All right, so let me pull up that job title list again. And I will share my screen so you guys can see what I am seeing. So I'm going to go into cohort 2. I'm at classroom.google.com. And I am going to go into classwork and drop down into links you should save. If you've already got this bookmarked, feel free to go through it that way. But I'm going to pop open the Google Classroom Drive. My internet is going to take its sweet time loading this. Okay, we're going to open up module 1. And I'm going to pop back open this Careers in IT. If you completed your homework before, I want to say about 3:30 today, I've added you into a Google group that will give you edit access to all of these documents. If you have submitted your Google account email later or haven't already done that, go ahead in. It's okay to submit that welcome form late, and I'll get you added to the group so you'll have edit access again. So a couple things that I want to highlight in this list. Webmaster is one of those careers that we're going to teach you. You could potentially be coming out of this program as a webmaster. The webmaster's job, again, is to design, maintain, build out websites, and then also be the support person behind it, right? So the person who, when you go, the website's wrong or the website's broken, I need someone to go to, that webmaster is a role that you could come out here doing. Full stack developer is something that is probably the most accurate job title that you could come out of careers in code as. And the reasoning for that is because we are going to teach you how to become a front-end web dev. And we're also going to teach you how to become a back-end developer. And all a full stack developer is someone who is both front-end and back-end, right? So
you need to make your screen bigger.
Oh, sure. So just to review, front end is anything involved with a user interface, what the person loading your site or your app or whatever it may be. The front end web dev is making that user interface. The back end developer is the person working on the servers and the databases and the APIs to make that work. And so combined, that front end and back end, again, is what a full stack developer is. And so in the exercise later tonight, that's what we'll be going over. Is what is a stack? How do we kind of puzzle piece things together to create a full stack? So I would say full stack developer is most representative. Back end and front end is kind of what is combined here. Website developer is similar to a webmaster, so I'm going to throw that in the list. Scrum Master down here. Scrum Master is a job title on its own, and there are oftentimes people who are technically minded but don't know how to code that become Scrum Masters. The other term that's probably more commonly used here is project manager. And so that's something that you could come out of this course. In fact, we had a student in the last cohort who became a project manager, but that isn't, you're not going to come out of here looking for project management jobs right off the bat, but it is definitely an option. UX designer, that's another one that we can highlight. You may be going through this course and learn all the front end stuff and go, that's great. Didn't love that, but I loved the back end. And it is entirely possible that you go off and you be a back end developer. It is also possible that you go through this, you go, I didn't really love the back end code. I understood the fundamentals of the front end, but really what caught my eye was designing websites. And that is a job that you can do full-time on your own, is using a program like Sketch or Photoshop or any of those to create a website and hand it off to a developer. So that's another one on the list where you could consider at the end of the program, UX is where I want to focus, and that's kind of where I want to get a job. And we'll be providing resources across the entire program where you can go and dive in and learn a little bit more about that. Application developer, I want to highlight on this just for 1 second. When we think of application, in the past 10 years, thanks to smartphones, when we think of applications, we mainly think of mobile applications. And so that isn't something that we'll be touching on in the course of the curriculum. However, one of the languages we are teaching is JavaScript. And JavaScript is known for being very flexible and running pretty much anywhere. JavaScript started out in the browser. So it started running out in Chrome or Firefox, or dare I even say Internet Explorer, which is the bane of most developers' existences. But JavaScript in the past 5-ish years or so has grown to be something that works server side, and that is called Node.js. And it also works in the on the mobile level as well. So iPhone and Android can run JavaScript through packages like NativeScript, React Native, Cordova, or PhoneGap. And so different frameworks, different ways of approaching that. That is something that we're hoping to, down the road, be able to offer almost a module on here's how you build a mobile app. It's not something that we'll be teaching as kind of the core curriculum, but just know that's a path that you may choose to go down of, hey, I really like this programming thing, but I think mobile is what I want to be doing. I don't want to make a web app. I want to make a mobile app. And that's something that you could do coming out of this program. And that's pretty much the core of all the things on this list. It's possible that you could come out of this job and start working at out of this program and start working at a help desk. It is possible that you could go into any one of these on the list, but these are kind of the main primary ones. So I'll take a break there and see, does anyone have questions? Is that a surprise to anyone? Did anyone look at a job on this list and go, oh man, I'm not learning that? All right, good. It means we marketed well. You guys knew what you were getting into. All right, so let's hop over to the syllabus. So in order to do that, I am going to jump out to cohort 2. No, I'm not. I'm going to see where this syllabus is. Dina, do you happen to know if we've shared the syllabus?
I don't believe we have. We only gave an overview of the modules during the kickoff.
Okay. Is there any problem with me sharing the syllabus?
No, I don't see one at all.
Okay. Well, let me copy that in to the classroom so you guys can access it, which would, of course, involve me finding it.
So I am looking at the Google email that was sent out. Oh, it's kind of long. Okay, I'm not sure if this was shared with the students. There was a link here to the syllabus. I'll get back to you on that though.
Okay, I'm gonna just see how well copy and paste works here.
Yeah, no problem.
Let's try this.
And what I'll do is, once I take a look and make sure that this link works, which I'm sure it will, I'll put the link address in the chat.
Okay. So you can either go through what Dana is about to post, or if you go back out to the Google Classroom Drive link, you can hop open into module 0 orientation. And I have a file here called syllabus. And you don't need edit access to this, but you should all be able to pull it up. Give you all a chance to do that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up the schedule just to give you a little context on who is teaching everything. So one great thing about the Upstate development community is we're very tight knit. So there are groups like Syracuse.io, which is a meetup that happens monthly. There is another meetup group for JavaScript developers in the area. And it's really amazing how when Jesse and Doug were pulling together the first cohort, they were pulling in different teachers. And by the time they had to pull them all in, I looked at the teachers list and I went, I know every one of these. And so that community is something that is a great thing to get involved in and be a part of. So you guys have made it to module 1. You have made it to that development big picture. So let me jump down to that section. You'll find that everything that I cover in my stand-up is coming from what these key objectives are. And the great thing about this program is that we approach it in a very agile method. So when we're going through this and we find different things that we're teaching, or we're running out of time to teach different things, at the end of the program, we're able to go back in and update the syllabus to make it even better. So one thing that we found in running the first cohort was that we were teaching React a little too late. React is a framework that we use on the front end to make interactive web pages. So think more web app than web page. And the student said, React is great, we want to use that, but we're trying to get our capstones done and we haven't covered that yet. So that's one thing that we were able to slide up in the program. So this is definitely flexible. And if you have any feedback on it, please feel free to share. So module 1, kind of big picture stuff. And tomorrow we're going to get, tomorrow we're going to get your development environment set up so you don't have to listen to me the whole time. We're actually going to get you writing your first line of code. We're going to install a program called VS Code, which we'll be using throughout the whole program. And then we're also going to cover a little bit more about project management and kind of how you can set up for success throughout the whole program. Module 2, this is where we're going to actually dive into coding. We're going to start making your first website. And I promise you, it is going to look ugly on day 1 of module 2. And by the time you get to the end of it, you're going to be amazed at what you can create and how excited you get when one little color changes on the screen. So the languages that we're going to be covering here are HTML and CSS. Karen Thorne is going to be your instructor for this module. However, Dana and Christy are tag teaming on that. Dana's going to come in and teach you a little bit about accessibility. Is that module 3, Dana?
It is.
Okay, so module 2 and 3 may blend together a little bit for you. Module 2 is going to be more about the core fundamentals of what is HTML, what is CSS, how do we lay things out. You're going to learn about something called the DOM, which is how the browser manages and renders all of your code. And there are going to be a little couple side tangents there, like how to get a website actually deployed and working on the internet, and an overview of what a content management system is, and WordPress is the biggest one there. If anyone has questions about a module, feel free to interrupt me before I move on to the next one. So module 3, you get the benefit of having another careers and code student. Caitlin is going to step in here, and she's going to teach you how to get from that code level and the fundamentals to how do I make something pretty, and how do I actually use, to loop in a term from yesterday, plugins or a framework or a package to make code faster. So how can I use other things that people have coded out and make a website for myself? So you're going to learn about Bootstrap in here. Dana's accessibility module is going to be in here. And Christy Pressler is also going to be teaching a little section on wireframing and mockups and how do we design something before we go out and start coding it all together. So that is module 3. Module 4, you get to have, I believe, Gus, who is a developer at a local company called Density, come back in and teach you the fundamentals of JavaScript. So this is how do we tell the computer how to do something, right? In modules 2 and 3, you're going to be focused on the look of how do I tell the computer this is what I want to show up. Module 4, we start getting into kind of the core fundamentals of computer science. So we're going to start talking about variables and functions, and we're going to make it so when you click on a button, something shows up. So Gus is going to come in for the first 2 weeks of that module. And then I come back for the second 2 weeks of that module, or the second half, to continue that JavaScript knowledge. From there, we're going to move on to Ryan, who is another developer at Density. And he is going to teach you all about the web and how developers interact with the web. So you're going to learn concepts like REST, which stands for Representative State Transfer. And REST is kind of at the core of the internet. You're going to learn about JSON, which stands for JavaScript Object Notation, which is a format that is pretty much the only format. I shouldn't say the only. It is the most used format for how other servers talk to your code, or vice versa. And you're going to learn a little bit about AJAX. So how do we actually send that data and get that data back? There's a term that you'll learn called CRUD, which stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. And that's kind of the core of any API, an application programming interface of, hey, I'm sending some information up. I'd like you to save it. That's the create operation. Or I'm getting some data back. I want to be able to read things, or update. You already have some information, but I'd like to change this piece of it, or delete. From there, you're going to work with Joey on React. And React is a framework that kind of marries HTML and JavaScript together. And so that allows you to start building more interactive websites, and the ability to get some data and say, hey, I would like all of this data to show up on the screen. You may have heard of Jquery before. Jquery was the primary way to work with JavaScript in the browser about 10, 15 years ago. And in the past 5 years or so, it's been started to be pushed out with React. Angular is the other major competitor to React, and you may have heard of something called Vue as well. So as you're learning these different modules, if you are reading a job description and you go, hey, I heard of this thing, where does that fit in? Feel free to ask the teacher of, like, is this a competitor? Is this something else that we're going to be using? Kind of like there's this, all of these different terms floating out there. So if you need help with a definition or figuring out where the puzzle pieces fit in, definitely bring that up with the instructor. So anyway, React is a front-end framework, and you've got 3 weeks of that to kind of learn how you make your website start to feel more interactive, show more data, start to feel more app-like than just a site.
Max, can I add something?
Shoot.
If you finish strong in modules 4 and 5, you should be just fine to continue in module 6. If you have any needs to take time off or be away from class, which you don't want to do that anyway, but what I found was, just speaking on the student side, when I had to miss a day during either one of those modules, when I came back, it felt like I missed a whole week. So you definitely want to remain strong as far as attendance, participation, and staying up on your homework. You want to do that anyway, but I can't stress it enough during those 2 modules, because you really want to go in strong with syntax and knowing how to think like a programmer before you get to React. Would you agree, Max?
Absolutely. React is where we kind of start building on the foundation of the previous modules. So you may find that the modules kind of stand alone up until the point of React, but React is when all of a sudden we're going to be relying on the previous module foundation to start pumping out what will start to feel like more real code, right? We're going to do project-based learning throughout the whole program. But React is definitely when we start to kind of tie those puzzle pieces together. And so if you're still struggling on the syntax of JavaScript, that's going to really trip you up when you get to React, because React is pulling in JavaScript and using that syntax. And if you're struggling on HTML and getting things to show up, well, that's going to hurt you again in React, because we're going to start marrying them together. So the React, and that's a great point, Dana, is when these pieces are all start coming together. So if at any point you feel like you're falling behind, or you're like, I did the homework, I got through it, I submitted it, but I'm still not feeling good about it, at that point, reach out to your instructors and say, hey, are there any more resources that you can help me here? And sometimes that extra time is all you need to get pushed over the hump and be set up for success. So from there, once you have React down with Joey, who's a developer at Raymore and Flanagan, we're going to move into Module 7. Module 7 is, again, building on that foundation. We're going to be using JavaScript, but instead of using it in the browser this time, we're going to be using it on the server side. So we're going to be using Node.js to make your own API. And so we're going to be pulling in a lot of concepts that Ryan is going to be teaching in Module 5. And instead of just using an API that someone else has built, we're going to learn how to build your own. So we're going to start talking about where to store your information, what the role of a database is, kind of getting into how to design code to really be able to operate with information. That is taught by me for the first week, and then Gus comes back in to teach the following 2 weeks of that. And right when you start to think you're getting sick of Gus, I'm going to come back in and we're going to start covering databases, right? So all of this information's flying around, and you're learning how to display it on the front end, and you're learning about how to structure that HTML, and you're learning about how to operate with that data in React to get that data to show up in your HTML. And you're taking all the fundamentals that Gus is teaching you on how to send that data back and forth, and you're getting Gus to come in and teach you how you handle that data on the back end. And now we get to kind of finally the last piece of it all, which is, where do I store that data? How do I maintain that data? What happens when that data grows? How do I structure that data? And so that's what Module 8 is all about, is the database and how we structure that data, also called modeling that data using SQL, which stands for Structured Query Language. How do we get data in? How do we get data out? And kind of how do we store it? And I believe, let me see, you get me for that entire module for 2 weeks there. Then we have our third density developer, who's an instructor coming in, Nathan, and he is going to cover a couple different modules in a row. He is covering infrastructure deployment and a term that is becoming more and more popular, DevOps. All right, we've got all of this code, and all of this code is running on my computer. What do I do with it? I want people to be able to use this code. I want people to be able to go to a website and just get on there. And so that's when we're going to start talking about managing servers and deploying your code to a server. This is something that developers tend to hate to do because they get it all working, and the term that you'll learn on your side is, well, it works on my computer fine. Well, just because it works on your computer doesn't mean it's going to work on other people's computers. So Nathan is going to cover what the cloud looks like from the development side. I believe, I know last cohort, we covered AWS, Amazon Web Services. I'm not sure if he is still planning on covering that, but he's going to cover DevOps. He's also going to cover testing. Sorry, I swapped the module order here. You're going to learn about testing first of, hey, I can test my code and I can show that it's working up fine, but how do we scale that out? How do we tell the computer how to test this code? So when I'm working on something else and I think it's ready to go, the computer can test hundreds of different things all at once and say, hey, you were working over here, but you broke this other feature and you didn't even know that you broke it. Excuse me. All different kinds of testing you're going to learn about in this module. You're going to learn about test-driven development, which is often abbreviated as TDD. Test-driven development is writing a test before you write any of your code. And then you go write the code until your test pass, and then you move on to the next feature and write out the test for that. You're going to learn about end-to-end testing, which is how do I tell the computer to pretend to be a user and click on all these different things, and when they get to the end, make sure that it actually works. You're going to learn about unit testing, which is how do I segment off my code and test little pieces of this to make sure that the big picture doesn't break at any of the little pieces. So lots of different things that you're going to learn from Nathan. And then finally, we have an intro to cryptography, authentication, and authorization. So we talked a little bit about this with the 3 A's yesterday. We're going to learn about what authentication looks like. We're going to talk about methods of authentication like SAML and OAuth, which is how do I integrate with other authentication providers. OAuth is commonly the technology whenever you see login with Google or login with LinkedIn or logged in with GitHub. OAuth is the technology powering all of that. And so you're going to learn about how to securely authorize with those sites without ever getting a hold of the user's password. You're going to learn a little bit about cryptography of how do we securely store a password so that we can verify the user's password is correct without actually ever knowing what their password is. And we're going to go over things like permissions. And so a little bit of this module will be a callback to what you're learning in the server side and node module of, hey, we created all of these different endpoints or all these different little sections of code. How do we make sure that the people who shouldn't be able to run them can't? And then we're going to finish up with your capstone. And your capstone, we're going to be touching on throughout the entire course of the program. We want to make sure that you get the fundamentals down first. So every week, we're going to have this little weekend project where you can start cementing these ideas and kind of making sure that you have a good grasp of everything that you learned that week or that module. But as the program progresses, instructors are going to start layering on more heavily, and this is what you should now go implement into your capstone. And so that is kind of the approach that we're taking of, hey, you're going to have a weekly project that's going to go over everything from the module. But then also, hey, we've got this big project at the end. So one thing that I would advise is definitely don't keep on putting off your capstone past, I would say, module 3 or 4. And we're going to have touch points where we won't let you get away with that. But your capstone is a great culmination, not only for you to say, hey, look at everything I learned. It's also probably the first thing a person hiring you is going to look at, right? They want to go somewhere and say, what did you put together? What do you know? What are these core concepts that you're going to be doing in the job? And how well did you implement them in your own project? And so that's why the capstone is so important, is that throughout the course of the program, you're going to have all of these standalone projects that an employer can browse and see that you get. But when I'm hiring someone, I don't look at someone's resume first. I don't go to the education section. I don't even go to previous work experience. I say, show me your code. Right? That's what I care about. That's what you're coming in. That's what I'm hiring you for. That's what I'm paying you for. And so I want something that is one project that I can look at that says, I want to make sure that you know all of the things that you said you have learned. And so that's what your capstone is meant for, is this kind of culmination of all of these modules that you can show off in one place. Okay. Any questions there? Any surprises there? Anything that you thought would be there and isn't there? Anything that is there and you're glad is there?
We have a question in the chat from Dominique. She said, can the capstone be a website that she's currently working on?
Absolutely. So we're going to encourage you to get all the ideas of your capstone, all of the ideas of the modules into your capstone. So what we will help you work on is getting your website to be more of a web app. And so what I mean by that is some interactivity, something that a user can click on and get more information. It may be adding a shopping cart to a website. It may be focusing more on the design or bringing in some cybersecurity aspect of it. So your capstone hopefully is a representation of everything in this module. And we can help work with you to figure out elements or features that you could add to an existing site to bring in some of these concepts. But it doesn't have to be something that you're starting from scratch. And we are going to encourage you. We'll actually probably be a little bit more disappointed than anything if you're not bringing in frameworks that we're teaching like Bootstrap and Node and Express and Sequelize and all of these terms that may not mean anything now, but are kind of building blocks that you can use to get to the end result quicker. And so throughout your capstone, we'll be helping you with that. But as you're learning throughout the module, kind of keep in the back of your head of, I wonder how I could use this. So this weekend, I can bring in these concepts that I've learned and build them into my own capstone.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other questions? So we'll be having capstone check-ins throughout the course of the entire program. So it isn't something that you'll be able to save to the end and then, go, oh my gosh, I've got to pull all of this together. So we'll be helping you over the course of the program. But the capstone is really meant to kind of illustrate everything that you've learned.
We have another question in the chat. Susan wants to know, is there going to be help with ideas? Because she's not creative in that way.
Absolutely. I would say every developer is more creative than they would like to take credit for. Creative, we have in our head of like, oh, you've got to be an artist. Well, I would say that you're all learning to be code artists, right? You cannot be a developer without being a creative problem solver, because all coding is busting through problems, right? Whether that's a problem that you're writing code to fix, or whether that's a problem that you're stuck on that's in your code. So start thinking about things that you interact with. Start looking for your capstone at something that you would like to solve that you think technology can help with. So if you can go out into your world and look at something and go, man, it would be great if there was an app for that. Or man, it would be great if that information were more accessible. Or man, would it be great? Any problem that you can think of in your day-to-day life, in your community, in whatever it is, just start identifying problems. Because if you can identify the problem, we can work together to figure out how we can use technology to come up with a solution. I would say that 80%, 90% of the students started off with a capstone idea that was a little too big. And that's okay, right? It is very natural to come up with a big problem and then need help whittling it down into something that's presentable by the end of the program. And that's what we're here for, is to help you work on that. What we need you to do is come to us with a problem, come to us with something that you would like to solve, and then we can figure out how to build some technology around that for your capstone.
And Max, there was one more thing, and you may have already covered it, but a student had posted a question in Slack this morning, and hopefully I get this right, but the student wanted to know what jobs would closely align with being hired from right out of the boot camp. Is there a job path, one more so than the other, than tech, that students should, where they should try to go for jobs upon graduation?
Absolutely. So what we highlighted in the spreadsheet at the first half of class are the job titles you're going to be most likely looking for.
Okay.
Historically, every company is a little different. So let me start off there. Some companies think I'm only going to hire front-end developers and they're going to work in a little section, and I'm going to hire designers and they're going to work in a little section, and I'm going to hire back-end developers. And the designers are going to do their thing and hand it off, and they're never going to see it again. And then the front-end developers are going to build out all of that code and hand it off to the back-end developers. And they're going to do whatever they need and hand it off to the database people. And they're going to do the database stuff and hand it off to DevOps. And DevOps is going to push it out, and that's it. We're done. There are other companies that go, all of that is great, but we want full stack developers. We want someone who we can hand a feature to and say, go get this done. And from start to finish, from coming up with the design, figuring out what that front end code looks like, figuring out what they need to do in the database and the back end server, and figuring out how to deploy that, is a more functional company. And so they only hire full stack developers. So it depends on what company structure you go to. That is the importance of an interview. If you show up to an interview at my company and don't have at least 2 questions, you're not getting a second interview. The point of an interview is as much to learn about the company you're interviewing at than it is for them to learn about you. And so those are questions you want to have of, what does a day-to-day, what does a day look like in this role, right? What am I sitting down and doing for 8 hours a day? How does collaboration work? Do you encourage working with other developers? What's testing look like? Do you guys test your code? What databases, what frameworks, what languages are you using? These are all super important questions that you may not know what the answers to them mean now, but over the course of the program, you're going to learn that, and you're going to learn that there are a ton of alternatives out there. And so while we are teaching one stack at Careers in Code, these skills are applicable to any other stack in that same category. And so the exercise that we're going to do after break is going to help you draw those connections and start understanding how everything kind of ties together. With that said, the one other thing I will add in there is, some companies believe that a front-end developer is a junior role and a back-end developer is a senior role. I don't find that to be true, but there are a lot of companies that believe that front-end is actually easier to do than back-end. And so for whatever reason, it means you're more junior if you can only make a website, and you're more senior if you can make an entire app. So you want to be careful with that. You want to look at job descriptions and see how many years of experience they're expecting. You will find job roles that say 3 to 5 years of experience. That's a junior role. You can apply for that. You're going to read job descriptions and go, I don't know this one thing, so I can't apply. Got to stop thinking that way. Does not hurt to apply. And I know Laura's going to be able to help with a lot of this. And there are going to be a ton of career opportunities available to you, and we can help you read job descriptions and kind of pull them apart and figure out what they're actually asking for. One quick anecdote before I open it up to any more questions. I looked at a job description a couple of years ago, and they said, we're looking for 10 years of React experience. And I contacted the company and I said, would love to apply for this job, but just letting you know, you're going to have a issue finding someone with 10 years of React experience. And they went, oh no, we're looking for someone super experienced in this. Sorry if you don't have that requirement. And I said, well, the founder of React doesn't have that requirement. React is only a couple years old, right? And so what you end up with is HR departments are coming up with these job descriptions, or they may be passed down technical requirements that they know nothing about. And so take every job description with a grain of salt. That doesn't mean that if they're looking for a senior position, that right out of the bat as a junior, you're going to slide right in and get that opportunity. But it just means that when you're looking at a job description and they're saying at least 2 or 3 years of experience, that is okay. You still want to apply for that job. Your interview skills and your code samples and your capstone project are all going to make you a better applicant for that job. Other questions? Corey, do you still have a question? Your hand's still up.
Sure. Yeah, I was trying to type it. Is there a trend within the industry where front-end developers and versus back-end developers, is there a difference in the pay grade? Is that a trend or no, based on that bias?
It all depends. The answer is yes. Back-end developers tend to get paid more than front-end developers. If it follows the trend that back-end developers are more senior than junior developers.
Within the structure of the company. Got it.
Yes. I will say that my company has hired developers who their front-end skills are much stronger, and then we have trained them to become full-stack developers. However, I've done interviews. It is my belief and the way that I run our company that everyone should be shooting to become a full stack developer. And so there are people, and I'm not saying anything against them, where they go, I specialize in front end and I am 100% happy writing HTML and CSS all day. And there are plenty of companies that will hire for that, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, when I hire, I'm fine with taking a junior developer in who is maybe more skilled in the front end, as long as they are willing to learn the back end. And so it really depends on the company. You want definitely to be asking about what does the senior developer role look like? There are companies that will make the mistake of hiring a junior developer because they think they can get away with a smaller salary, and then will have no mentor above you for you to learn from. And that's a really dangerous situation to get into. Being self-taught is great. Having the drive and being able to go out and learn things is awesome. However, in a company position, if you're inheriting any code or if you get stuck on a problem, even as a junior developer, it's expected that you have a resource at the company that you can go out and ask questions of. So it is really hard to make the jump from junior developer to senior developer without another senior developer advising you. And so that's one thing to look out for in a small company. I'm in a small company. I came in as the first employee, and we've grown up to 12 different people. But one thing that I've always been adamant about is we're not going to bring in junior developers just because they're cheap, without having a senior role that we can match them up with. And so that's something that you can ask in a job interview is, well, what's your learning look like? How do you encourage me to continue to learn and grow? Because back to something I said yesterday, if you're not growing as a developer, you're moving backwards.
If I can just add to that, I do know of horror stories of folks who graduated, who went into companies thinking that they were going to get support as a code newbie or entry level coder or programmer, and they did not get the level of support that they needed, and it quickly turned sour. And so I would say, definitely to echo what Max is saying, you definitely want to make sure that you go into a company knowing that they are going to support your learning as a new coder or programmer.
There's nothing embarrassing about saying you're junior. You don't need to make it sound like you're some senior developer who knows it all. Any applicant I have interviewed who comes off as if they know it all, they don't get a second interview, right? Because to go back to that imposter syndrome thing, there's no way you can learn all of it. And I would much prefer someone to come in confidently and say, here's what I know, and I'd like to learn, more about these things, and I'm happy to learn new things, but realistically, here's where I'm at, and here's what I've created, and here's what I know. And then also be prepared to say, you know what, I don't know Angular, but I know what Angular is, and I know that I know React, and I know that they accomplish the same goal, and I know I can take a lot of those concepts and apply it to Angular and learn Angular. And so that's going to be the point of this next exercise, is throwing out all of these things that you have heard or seen in a job description or language, whatever it is, and breaking them down just so we have an idea of like, what do we use them for? What's this thing actually for? And so we're going to do that right after the break. Susan, question?
Yes, I have a question. I'm just wondering how you can, like, to play off what Dana said about people not getting the support. Like my last job interview, which was, I worked waiting tables, but they said a bunch of stuff in my interview and literally none of it was true. Like the interview he hired me with, it was all BS. And I mean, it ended up being a good job. So the stuff they said kind of didn't matter, but how are you supposed to know whether they're BSing you? Like these people obviously thought they were going to get help and didn't.
Absolutely. It is hard to understand the demand for developers and how many job opportunities there are until you get into the job market. And once you're into the job market and you have experience as a junior developer for a couple years, all of a sudden you make it to this mid-level or in between the junior and senior roles. And all of a sudden, these recruiters start reaching out to you. I'm not kidding, between 5 and 6 recruiters contacting me on LinkedIn a week. This industry, while overall while employee loyalty has plummeted, and that the length that you hold a single job at a single company, that the number of years you're at a company on average has been shrinking. If you look at that in the tech industry, it drops down to like 2 to 3 years is on average how long you spend at a company. And the reasoning behind that is because as developers, you want to move up. And so if the company that you're at doesn't give you the opportunity and the resources you need to move up, you can easily say, look, I've learned everything that I can learn here. I need to go get back out in that job market. I still do practice interviews, even though I'm happily employed at my job, right? Because that's a skill that I think is important to stay up on. It's important to keep your resume up to date. Even if you've been in a job for 3 years, well, you've accomplished different things at that job. You've completed different projects. You should be going in and updating your resume every 6 months or so, because you never know what opportunity is around the corner. And so the way I would say that you can combat not getting those resources is, 1, ask those questions in the interview. 2, be vocal. One-on-ones are very common in the tech industry. Meeting with your boss once a week, once every other week, at least once a month. It's not about a performance review. It's not about filling out some paperwork and checking off boxes. The point of the one-on-one is to say, hey, here's what you're not doing well. Here's what I need more help with. But also, I want to open the door and give you the opportunity to say, how can I improve? Because it's not about criticism. It's about constructive criticism. And so our industry, because there is such a demand for developers, companies are trying everything they can to hold on to them. And so sometimes the squeaky wheel, is the one that gets fixed, and you need to actively work with your manager or your boss or your team and say, I need more help with this. Can you give me the resources? But that is always floating around in the back of your head of, there are other companies that need developers, and it's possible that this isn't the right fit for me. I could get out of this program and think I am full stack. That is what I want to do. And you work in a company for 6 months doing full stack work, and they open the door for you for mobile development. And you start doing mobile development and fall in love with that and go, that's what I want to do full time. And most companies will come back to you if they are growing and say, great, let's change your job title, go do that. Or you go, you know what, it's not the right fit. I've worked here for 6 months, a year, however long. I want to just test the water and see what other opportunities are out there for me. And that's a completely fair thing to do.
Max, I have a quick question for you. Was it you who said that you read a job description for a company and they were hiring for a new technology and wanted 10 years, and that particular piece of technology had not even been around for 2 years?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is so common for requirements to be listed that you just can't meet, right? Oh, we would like 15 years of career experience, and this is an entry-level position. Right? And at that point, you go, all right, I read the job description, I read the requirements, I kind of get an idea of what I would be doing at this job. I'm going to apply and I'm going to figure out a way to stand out. There is something called the spray and pray method of sending resumes out everywhere and just praying that, someone bites on them. It can be an effective method. And again, I don't want to step on Laura too much here because she's going to help with the whole career side, but figure out how to stand out. I have gone on LinkedIn and found the person working in HR at a company and messaged them and said, hey, can I buy you a cup of coffee? Obviously, in the pandemic, a little harder to do that, but we're reaching out to one of their team leads and saying, hey, I'm really interested in this company. I've read up on what you guys do. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Because now all of a sudden you sit down with them for 30 minutes, you talk to them, you shoot them a follow-up thank you email that specifically mentioned something that you talked about in the conversation, right? It isn't just a, hey, thanks for your time. It's, hey, thanks for your time. I really learned a lot about React. I didn't have that on my radar, and I'm super excited to go learn more about it. Because what you just did is you may get the response, we're not hiring right now, or sorry, we don't have any opportunities. But you can bet that when that team lead does need to hire, you're going to be the first person on their mind, and your resume is already going to be on file.
Corey has a question. And Corey, I know that you had your hand up for a while. Was this something that you wanted me to read, or did you want to go ahead and ask yourself? You're on mute, Corey.
Yeah, so it was a follow-up. There was an interesting testimonial where you saw people that were in a nightmare situation, and they were unsupported, but yeah, there's other job opportunities out there, but people, got families and things like that locally. How does a junior developer swim in a company that's not supporting?
In the case of the person that I am referring to, it did not end well with that particular company, but because those skills were recognized by another company, this person didn't miss a beat. As Max was saying, and as I will also testify to, the tech field is booming. You go into companies where they don't know what their needs are. They don't know how to support junior level programmers. Hopefully you will get enough of what you need so that you will recognize that before you even agree to take a job in one of those companies. You'll know what kinds of questions to ask. And Max did a great job of giving us in cohort 1, the 411, on how to recognize when you're stepping into that kind of situation. So after you are equipped with the tools, you're simply going to have to use them and use your own eyes, ears, and discernment to know whether or not that company is a good fit for you, but also know that even if you do step into it and it ends up being that way, that you have enough skills to get out there, and there's going to be a plethora plethora of junior developer opportunities that will still be waiting for you, even if it doesn't work out with the first company that you're hired by. Max?
Absolutely. One interesting phenomenon that you'll have throughout the class is you're going to go through and all the way up to week 24, all the way up to module 13, you're going to feel like there's one more thing to learn and that you're never going to be able to get to the end of that list. And then you're going to get to the end of the list and go, oh, look at what I made. Look at all the things I pulled together. I know about databases and security and servers and websites and all of this stuff. And you're going to start looking at job descriptions and go, oh, I don't know that. But then you're going to go, wait, Max said something about Angular. What did Max say about, what did we learn instead? Oh, we learned React. Oh, well, let me go read about Angular and see what that does. That does the same thing React does. I can take all of those concepts and yeah, the syntax may be a little different or the language may be a little different. But at the end of the day, every programming language, no matter what one I'm learning, is going to have some notion of variables. They're going to have some notion of functions. They're going to have some, right? Like you're going to start going through this stuff and you're going to go, oh, this all maps together, right? There are only so many ways you can make an app. And so all of those concepts, while they may be called different things, it's still the same concept. And so one thing you'll find, especially in the Syracuse market, is there's a huge demand for .NET. .NET is a Microsoft framework. It is, I could ruffle some feathers here. I'm personally not a .NET fan. It is an older framework. It is a very stable framework. It is a very expensive framework. But companies who have a couple hundred developers hired for .NET can't just throw a switch and go, you know what, JavaScript's the future. We're going to start using everything in JavaScript. Because not only do you have to now hire everyone for JavaScript or get all of your developers to learn JavaScript, but you need to migrate all of this old legacy code over to JavaScript. Nothing wrong with .NET. .NET is still supported. Microsoft still releases regular updates on it. There is still a huge job demand for it. So over the past, I don't know, 30 years, there have been 6 or 7 programming languages that kind of became really popular. And then the next new thing came out and everyone went shiny and moved over to shiny, right? JavaScript is the latest popular language. It's the language that most of our instructors know and are able to help with. And it is the most full stack of any of the languages in that you can write JavaScript that runs in the browser, you can write JavaScript that runs in the server, and you can run JavaScript that runs in a mobile app. And that's what we thought the future was headed towards and what we wanted to teach. However, that is definitely a skill that you'll pick up in your interview is someone will say, well, what do you think about this? And if you've never heard of it before, say, hey, can you help me? Like, what do you use that for? What category does that fit in? Can you name something else? Because they'll come back and go, oh, yeah, well, I guess it's kind of like, React, or it's kind of like this thing. And you go, oh, I remember that. Here are the concepts that I know that are probably true in that as well.
That was my experience with my very first internship that I was able to obtain even before I graduated. One of the things that Joey, and you'll meet Joey because he is the React instructor. So he just kept saying, it's about patterns. Notice the pattern. That literally saved my tail. I got into this internship and part of what he was using was PHP. I don't think we even mentioned PHP during careers in code. And I'm looking at it like, oh my gosh, what is this stuff? And I looked at it for a few minutes and I said, this looks like React. Well, let me see where they're putting the semicolons. Let me see where they're putting the brackets. I know how to construct this. The syntax is a little bit different. So I'm going to treat it like React and see if it works. And I kid you not, by the second day, I was rocking and rolling through that code and had never touched PHP a day in my life. So when I tell you that you're going to come out with literally everything that you're going to need as a great basis as a junior web developer, you recognize the syntax, the patterns, everything that Max just mentioned, you're going to be just fine. Even if you walk into a company that is not using the things that we're talking about, because between HTML, JavaScript, React, it pretty much covers the patterns that you're going to see with every other programming language that is popular nowadays within these companies for your front end as well as your back end.
I cannot think of a more opinionated industry than technology. To give you the best example of this, a programming language, some programming languages are better at certain tasks than others, right? And so it's natural to be able to have a healthy conversation about, well, I like JavaScript for this, and someone else may use Python and go, well, I think Python is better for this. But it goes down to tabs versus spaces. If you walk into any development community, any developer who's been writing code for a couple months and go, oh, do you prefer tabs at the beginning of your code or spaces at the beginning of your code? You can start an all-out war on people who think tabs is the way to go and spaces is the way to go. I'm kidding you. I'm not kidding you, down to that level of opinion, of having an opinion over something. So as long as you're able to draw parallels, having an opinion, there's nothing wrong with it, and going in and saying, you know what, I'm applying for this job and I don't know that language, but I know this language and here are all the things that I know about that language. And then that's a conversation starter in the interview. Hey, here are the concepts that I know that are really a part of this language. Do they apply in this language or is it something else? Do I have this in the right category? You know, how am I thinking about that kind of thing? So it's a scary thing, but just keep requirements as a target list of what they're looking for in a job description, it's not a strict or hard requirement. Any other questions? Okay, so we're going to take a break. Carolyn, I'm happy to take a question during the break. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break. We'll shoot to be back here at around 7:20. And what we're going to do is we're going to put this in practice. We're going to start just throwing out languages and frameworks and acronyms and whatever you have thought of. And then we're going to start breaking that down a little bit into how those stacks kind of all pull apart. So go take your breaks. I will be here during the break, but I'll see you guys all at 7:20.
Max, are we still doing this diagram activity?
Yeah, we'll start with the framework, and then hopefully I'll be able to squeak in the diagram. If not, I will make out the diagram and share that with you as like an additional video if you're interested.
Okay.
Carolyn, do you have a question?
Yeah, and I think this might help others as well. A lot of places, they don't like look through the applications. It goes, or it doesn't even go through HR, it goes through algorithms and bots and Lord knows what else. And so it's looking for Python, let's say, and you don't have that on your resume because, you know, that's an issue because you could get, you know, taken out of the group that might be considered and put
Absolutely.
to the side. How do we, I mean, that's just a yucky way that jobs are looked for nowadays. I don't know, my opinion. You know, because like what you were saying, I really like it. And Dana was saying, because it isn't necessarily the XYZ of what you know, it's the concepts that go with that, and you know what you can do with it. And if you can see right away, you know, XML versus XHTML or DC Dublin Core metadata or whatever it is, you know, it shows you're able to do that. You have that capacity, but you can't convince some bot that you can't see on LinkedIn. So
Absolutely.
I want to, you know, so I just thought I'd bring that in. I don't know if it might benefit others just to have a discussion about that or whatever. I don't know.
Sure. When everyone gets back, I will rephrase your question or restate your question and then answer that. But
Great.
there are things you can do, and it's a lot like SEO.
Okay.
Some of the things you can do are kind of a little dirty, and you can get away with them to get around the bots. Some of them are just general good hiring practices. But when everyone gets back, I will go over that.
Great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hey, Max, I'm just now realizing that I didn't take attendance yesterday. And I was going to ask you if you might have done it. I know that we have that Zoom will actually take attendance for us. And so I see that Jesse has this attendance form also. So I think what I'll do is I'll just go into Zoom and look for that once we're done.
I already did that. I thought that was the instructor's responsibility, not the TA's responsibility.
Okay, great.
So I already filled it out for last night.
Okay.
And I sent I think you were in the thread where I sent the link for Zoom and checking the attendance.
Yeah.
But that's something we should probably figure out is it up to the TA to do that or up to the instructor? I don't mind either way, but that's just something we should figure out.
Yeah, because I know that we hadn't actually talked about it. And then I think what we were trying to do was just to hand that off as a function of Zoom. So I think we can talk about it in Friday's meeting or maybe asynchronously in Slack.
Good idea. Yeah, it only took me like 3 or 4 minutes to go in, but you do kind of have to match it up with the Google form. And make sure all the students' names are matching up with what's in Zoom, and then just check anyone off. So it doesn't take a lot of time to do it, but it is something that we should just figure out. Like, is that up to the instructor or the TA?
Okay, that's fine, and I'm fine to since you're already doing it, just to let you continue. If you want me to take attendance at any point, just let me know.
Sure, I will take care of that for this week.
Okay, sounds good. All right.
Thanks.
Great.
Brielle, you have a question?
Yes. I had a question about doing the assignments on Google Classroom.
Yep.
So, for example, I did the response to the read the Twitter thread with the question about the different languages earlier, and then it said it was missing, and then I've done it twice more and it still says it's missing, and I've submitted it 3 times now. And the same thing with the module office hours. I went in and I added my name and picked office hours, and it still says assigned and not turned in.
Well, let's see what it looks like on the teacher side. So it does say you turned in the fill out welcome form.
Not the fill out welcome form, the module 1 day 1.
Yeah, let me go to that one. Are you talking about the office hours?
Well, I did do the office hours too, and it still just says assigned, not turned in.
So the office hours is fine because it's not part of the Google ecosystem. It's part of Doodle. So that one I wouldn't worry about turning in. So the only other one was the read Twitter thread on video in Zoom. So let me look at that one. And okay. Does not say you've turned it in. So let me go into the actual form and see if I can see your response. Do you have multiple Google accounts signed in on your computer?
Yes.
When you click on the link to fill out the form, does it change your account to the one that doesn't match the classroom?
No, I think I had to select which account originally, and I thought I did. Let me, I do have multiple accounts though, so if I how would I change that if that would be the problem, that it's sending it from a different Gmail
Once
account?
you open the form, it should give
Mhm.
you the option to just change the account in the top right.
Um, hmm. It
Maybe
says
I'm
it's
wrong
Braille
about that.
Daily. No, it has the correct email. When I go into settings, it shows the account is the Brielle Daily at Gmail.
Interesting. I just loaded the form incognito, which means it won't be able to see my account, and it didn't even ask me about the account. So there would be no way if someone submitted this that I would know who submitted it.
Because I mean, it even graded it, and I had gotten the things right, and then it said, to be graded, celebrate different errors. So if I pick everything again. And then I hit submit, and it says your response has been recorded, and should I hit view score or open assignment?
Either way, it still says missing on my side, and yet I saw the number of submissions tick up.
Yeah, so I mean, total points 2 out of 3, and it says, my points and everything. Open assignment. You open the assignment in Google Classrooms. That's the same thing, and it still says missing.
Let me work on that and get back to you.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I'm, keeping up with the work, but
yeah, no one will lose points, especially on week 1. Caitlin Warby is a student from cohort 1. But she, before she got her developer job at Raymore and Flanagan, was a teacher and is certified in Google Classroom. So I may hit her up and figure out if she's ever had someone run into this problem.
Okay. Yes, no, I know who she is. Actually, her mother was a coworker of mine that told me about this program.
Oh, great.
Yes, because Caitlin loved it so much. So
yeah, let me reach out to her and see if she's got any advice. No one will lose points. It's more something that we just need to figure out how to fix on our side. And one of the great things about being a developer is sometimes figuring out where it's broken is actually much harder than figuring out how to fix it.
Oh dear. Okay.
But thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Okay.
We'll come up with some solution.
Thank you for your help. I don't know. I'm trying to think if somehow it says, I'm signed in on the Brielle Daily at Gmail accounts for all this. So,
yeah, I don't think you're doing anything wrong. It just may have to be something that we figure out how to adjust.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for helping me with it. I appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks for bringing it up.
All right.
I'll let you
back
take
in
your
5
break.
minutes.
Yep.
Thanks.
See ya.
Hey, Max. I just wanted to jump in and say that I had the same problem as Brielle. I marked it as done. I don't know if I shouldn't have done that, but it still says no work attached. So I don't know if everyone's having that problem or not.
Interestingly enough, not everyone is, but there are people who did the other assignment that didn't do the read Twitter one, and I'm guessing that they had the same problem. So when
Okay.
everyone gets back, I'll specifically mention that and that, don't worry about losing points or anything. We'll figure that out and then have a solution for you.
Okay, thanks, Max.
Max, I noticed the same thing too, and I thought it's just because there was really nothing to attach.
For the
I'd have to go into each one, but like just now I looked at, well, office hours, obviously. I know, we just talked about that.
yeah, the office hours one is the only one that I would think that would be doing that, but the read Twitter thread, I can clearly see there are like 22 responses on that, and we don't even have 22 students. So it's interesting that I can see you guys submitting it, but then I can't see, it doesn't have it marked as done. So I'm guessing that that's something that we'll need to adjust, but I wouldn't worry too much about it now.
Okay. Yeah, no work attached on the welcome form. It says it's turned in, but nothing attached. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just clicked mark as done. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So I marked them all as done. So.
The curse of being a developer is you start figuring out why it's broken. And even if it's not your own code that's broken, your mind starts racing as to like, well, where could that possibly be broken? And then you wake up at 3 in the morning and go, oh, it must be this weird random thing that no normal person would think of.
And then you have to try to figure out someone else's code.
Yeah, I would say that 90% of debugging is figuring out where it's broken, and 10% of it is actually fixing it.
My husband's been in the software business for 20, 30 years. And where he is now, they're working with a very antiquated system that's been added on and patchworked together. And different people that weren't really developers, but kind of learned programming on the job. More power to them, but it's a nightmare to go through their code. They don't indent, they don't, so it's like,
there is a command called git blame, and you can run it on any file that you're tracking in your source control software, and it will tell you not only what date that code was written, but the exact person who committed it in, and what the commit message was with that particular line of code.
yeah.
But for several years, I was the only developer at my company. And so I would constantly be messaging my boss going, who in God's name wrote this code? And his response would be like, wonder who that could be.
Your twin brother.
Exactly.
Yeah,
evil
no,
twin.
where my husband works too, they have a system where there are initials. So, I mean, you know who it was, but it like was 30 years ago kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just a nightmare some of the code is just not easy to even go through.
Right.
It's like a nest.
Who wrote this code was, it is a miracle this code works.
Yeah. And that they didn't get fired. No.
Exactly.
These are people that didn't go through boot camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't limit it to just a boot camp. I think it's only natural to write code as a developer, your first project, and even professionally, where you would take it back all now if you could and write it a completely better way. But no way to improve unless you have a starting point. Everyone a minute or two to get back.
Oh, hey, I also just wanted to say, in case people see me like looking at my lap a lot, it's because this is how I'm taking notes. So
Not a problem.
Totally not related to class at all, but I wanted to tell Dana this because she is in love with whiteboards like I am. We actually have these Expo whiteboard markers that tell you like where the ink is. And I've literally had these since the beginning of school. My kids use them every single day for virtual school, and they're really cool.
Let me see. I have some markers too. Let me see if they're the same ones. Hold on.
So these are really helpful if anybody does take the whiteboard method and want to grab a whiteboard.
Yeah, mine said, let's see, mine say I'm fine. I don't, wait a minute, where, oh, here we go. I have a couple of different screens going. Can you see that?
Oh yeah, so yours does show the 8 too. I thought that this was like totally new. I've never seen it until like this year when I was doing some school shopping, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Well, it probably is new. I just got these last week with my whiteboard.
Yeah, see, I got these at the beginning of the school year, but
okay,
they're really cool.
So before we begin, Max, I just want to give a general reminder to everyone, the different channels that you're using. Please know that Slack is what we primarily use to communicate with you for Careers in Code. The channel that you should be using is the, hold on, I just put it here in the chat. Let me hit the enter button so that everyone can see it. Okay, so the channel that you should be using, because your instructors, TAs, and me and Jesse, we monitor the C, it's the C1, I put CI, why did I do that? Students -C2, I have a typo in there, but it's the student channel for Careers in Code. General questions, and even if you're running late for class or if there is an issue and you need someone to respond sooner rather than later, please communicate with us over there. Discord is what we use, or what we will be using for your breakout, your video breakout sessions, one-on-one help sessions. That's where you'll be communicating through video and voice outside of Slack, okay? If it's some type of private message that you don't want anyone else to see and you're trying to get in contact with someone, more often than not, I'm on Slack. You can send those personal things to me that you need me to be aware of, or Jesse. If you are going to be absent from class, you should be using Slack to send a message to your professor. You're also free to use email, okay? But I don't want it to be a situation where there's something going on and you're trying to reach us and you're over in Discord. We do not monitor Discord for those types of communications. When I do communicate with you over in Discord, it's primarily, or what I'm hoping to primarily use it for, is just to guide you if you have any questions with using Discord. So the non-emergency stuff, because I'm probably only checking that maybe twice a day. Any questions about that? Okay, so Slack is where you want to be.
I think I registered twice. I don't know.
Did you have a question, Corey?
Yes, I don't know if you heard me. I said I had difficulty getting into Discord. I think I have 2 registrations in my inbox. I got confused.
Those would both be invites, and the invite might look different. Click on one, and if you're able to get to the Hack Upstate Discord, then that's fine. If you can't get in using the first invite, you can try the other one. Or if you look at your emails, just use the most recent one that you have. Those are just shortcut links, and I believe you can click on any of them, and it should take you to Discord. But if you still run into a problem, just hit me up in Slack. But I can also stay on for a few minutes after class is done, and we can try to work on it together.
Okay, thanks.
All right, you're welcome.
All right, two quick things that came up during break. It appears that there is an issue in Google Classroom where even after you have filled out the Google form, it doesn't say that it's complete or that it says that it's missing. It appears to be a glitch with Google and something that I need to work out as an instructor, because I can see your form responses coming in and they're still not getting marked as done in Google Classroom. So do not panic about things not being tracked or you losing points or anything like that. I'm going to hit up another instructor that I know happens to be certified in Google, and see if I can get some advice from her on how to get that working. So do not worry if assignments say they are missing and you've turned them in or turned them in several times. We will get to the bottom of that, and don't think that you're missing out on anything. The other question that came up that Carolyn had was, how do you combat bots? How do you combat these companies that have hundreds of applications coming in that get filtered by a computer before they even make it to the employer or a person going through them? So these bots are set up to say, hey, whatever application comes in, if they don't have this specific language listed on the resume, throw them in some pile that we're never going to look at. So one piece of advice that I can give is, your resume, you do not need one blanket resume to send out to everyone. So in addition to your resume, you should be writing a cover letter that you change for every single person you apply to. Because while you're hoping that they look at your resume, the cover letter is your opportunity to stand out. So you want to be doing research on the company. You want to spend 10 minutes on their website figuring out what this company does, what excites you about the company, what can you find out about their technology, and that should be a paragraph in your cover letter of, this is why I am excited to work for you guys. I have not ever hired an applicant whose cover letter did not stand out. So your cover letter, as soon as it is a form letter, it goes right in the recycling pile. And so one thing that we actually did this round was we said, whoa, we have too many responses. It's hard for us to filter through all of this. Send us something that makes you stand out. And we said, it can be a video, it can be a website, it can be a slide presentation, it can just be a letter. Just send us something that's a cover letter that stands out. I had someone send me a website they custom built that had sliding cards and pictures that if you clicked on them, you would get a little text with them. I had someone send me a slide deck, and their fun fact was that they were an extra in Magic Mike. I had developers who sent in videos about their background and all of that stuff. So obviously, that's a more unique hiring practice, but your cover letter is one opportunity to stand out. And be able to get through the bots, right? So we talked about SEO a little bit, and ethical hacking, and you know, what can you get away with and what can't you? Well, in your cover letter, you can easily mention something like, I see you guys are using Python, and I have started to apply the fundamentals of my programming language, JavaScript, to learn more and more about Python. Well, now all of a sudden you slip through that bot's filter because you mentioned that programming language. The other thing you can do is make your resume custom tailored to that company. So yes, JavaScript is your primary language and that's what you learn, but no one said you can't have a section on your resume saying languages on my radar. And that language is listed out in the job description of, hey, I spent 15 minutes playing around with Python. I got it working on my computer. I can put that on my resume. Now, you're not going to put it on your resume as, I know this language, right? You're not going to claim that you have years of experience with it. But what you can do is say, hey, this is something that I've played around with, and this is something that I want to learn more about. Yeah, it's kind of in the gray area of what's ethical to list on your resume. And you're not going to list it on your resume for every job that you apply to. But there's nothing wrong with optimizing your resume for that specific company that you're applying to. And so it's all about what approach you're going to take while you're applying. If you're going to be taking that spray and pray, of how many places can I apply to, obviously going to be much harder to come up with an individual cover letter and application for each job. But if you're taking that approach of, let me do research on this company, let me figure out really where I want to work, and let me figure out ways to stand out for them, that's how you can slip through those bots, is by optimizing for each individual employer. The one other thing I will say before I let Bentley ask their question is these hiring companies are going to use, most of them are going to use something called oh my God, I just blanked on it. An ATS, an application tracking system. And these ATSs are basically specialized spreadsheets that allow you to post a job description and keep track of everyone in this hiring process. When we did our last hiring round, I would be having between 10 and 15 interviews a day that were all 30 minutes long. And different people would be at different phases of the application. And it is so easy to lose track or be like, oh, did I talk to that person? Were they the one who had JavaScript experience, or were they the ones who were super excited about learning JavaScript, right? Like, it's so easy to get lost in that process. And so the way to combat that is use your own tracking system. Keep track of everywhere that you apply. Keep track of who you talk to, what you talk to them about, and when you should reach back out to them. No company should ever receive a resume and then you never hear back from them. Never should that happen. It happens all the time. And so you want to combat that. Stay on top of where you apply. Send up a follow-up email and say, hey, I applied 2 weeks ago. I know you guys are probably swamped. Do you have a timeline of when I might be hearing back from you? You are going to get rejected, and that is just a part of this process. But again, squeaky wheel gets the attention. Reach out to them and give them an action item. Make them say no to you, right? It isn't just, hey, just checking in to see if I'm still in the running. It's asking them a question of, when can I expect to hear back from you, right? It's giving them the out and making it easy for them to respond. So there are all of these little tricks that you can do in the hiring process that every person is going to have a different technique. And some people will apply to 1,000 jobs and they'll get one response and it will be perfect and they'll go that way. Other people will just apply to 5 different jobs, but they'll really sink a lot of time into it. And that's what will be the good fit. Obviously, bigger companies are more likely to use these automated processes to weed people out. But there are ways around them, like listing the language, even though you may not know it. Even if you have just played with it and you get what it's for and you wrote a little Hello World program, you can put that on your resume as long as you are honest about it and say, I've played with this, but I don't have years of experience with it.
Bentley has his hand raised to ask a question.
Shoot.
Yeah, so this is just real quick. I was wondering, excuse me. So is it becoming more of a common practice for people to use videos for their cover letters? Or because I've actually seen that a few times during recent job application processes. So I was just wondering if it's also becoming more common in tech or just in general.
Absolutely. I think it's a trend. It's a trend our company has jumped on. It has been super helpful. We kind of we wanted to see some creativity in the applicants. And I would say that cut our applicant pool down by 1/3. And that's what we really needed help with, was we needed someone to stand out. And I asked for cover letters from some people, and they just resent me their generic cover letter and didn't even put our company name in there. And it was like, all right, good luck in your job search. Like, that's not going to work, right? And that's not to say that the video is a silver bullet. We had some people apply, and it was just this like, like, you know, you get a pretty good vibe pretty quickly just off of video, whether or not you're going to work with that person well or not. I just hired a senior developer about 6 months ago, and I drove him crazy because I gave him a coding test and gave him no objectives. Normally, you come into a coding test and they say, here's what we need you to do. You've got an hour to do it. Go get it done. Right. And that's a straightforward thing. And you go out and you make sure you're hitting on all these points and using the terms and all this stuff. And he got to the end of it and went, well, how did I do? And I went, oh, you did great. And he went, but what did you learn from this? Like, you didn't ask me to prove any skills. You didn't. And I said, oh, the point of our coding test is not to prove yourself. The point of the coding test is to make sure that we'll work well together, because I'm going to be collaborating with you. And that's the most important thing to me. You know a different language, but you're a senior developer. I've no doubt that you're going to pick up on it quickly. And I just needed to know that we're going to work well together and can pair program together. And he went, I cannot wait. I really hope I get an offer for this company, because so many times you're going to be put on the spot, and they're just going to be, you know, giving you these tough problems or data structures that you're never going to work with in real life or whatever it is. So yes, there are companies that are getting more creative. The one little thing I'll throw out there is it is possible that you open your company up to more bias and more potential lawsuits of they've seen me, so they are biased against who they are trying to hire for. My counter to that would be, well, you're going to interview with them at some time, and they're probably going to be on video. We do have a requirement for video in our hiring process, because that's how we work together every day is jumping on a video call. So the way we could combat a lawsuit is saying, well, it's a requirement of our hiring process to be able to see you, because it's a requirement that you perform that in a job and can hop on a video call and all that kind of stuff. So not a legal expert, just one little facet or one side effect of requesting more video. But yes, video is definitely something I see being more and more involved. You don't need to be a YouTube producer. You don't need to invest in editing or equipment or anything like that. But it's a great question, and definitely something I see more of in the hiring process. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay. So I have shared a file in the Google Classroom Drive under Module 1 called Languages, Frameworks, Packages, Oh My. I would encourage everyone to pop that spreadsheet open, and I'm going to ask you not to use the Zoom chat at this point, only because we're going to have information flying in from several different places. So either unmute and throw out a language or a package or a framework or something you have heard a developer mention and have no idea what it is. Whatever comes to mind, either add it to the spreadsheet and just try and be careful about typing in a cell that someone else is in. And then we will start going through that list. Don't worry about duplicates. We'll filter that down in a second. But go ahead and just unmute and throw it out there, or hop into the spreadsheet and start typing. And this is already a great start.
You don't want us to do it in the chat, in Zoom?
If you could either open the spreadsheet and do it right in the spreadsheet, or just unmute and throw it out, and I'll type it in.
Okay, I'm using two computers.
Oh.
So is it in the Google Drive space or the classroom space?
Go, I think.
Hello?
Go is a good one. I'll get that added. And I'll also put the link to the spreadsheet. Oh, I'm sorry. Just sent that just to one person. The link is in the Zoom chat if you want to just pop it open from there. I'll make sure everyone has edit access to this. And then if you sent me your Gmail through that welcome form, we'll make sure that you get access on the group very quickly. This exercise is always fun for me because there's always at least one language I've never heard of before and have to look into. This is looking
What was the one
good.
you kept mentioning in relation to React? Was it Angular?
Yep.
Yeah, I can put that on there too.
Go for it.
So where are you again inside of module 1? I'm playing catch up now.
I'm in module 1, languages, frameworks, packages, oh my.
Okay, and I can find that under the classwork tab, or should I be under stream?
Go to the, if you go to the links you should save section.
Oh, are you on the syllabus?
No, I'm on, let me go back to the classroom. Under module 1, there's a links you should save. And in there is the Google Classroom Drive.
Thank you. Okay, I'm there now.
And then module 1 from there, and then languages, frameworks, packages, oh my.
Okay, thank you.
The list is looking good. Encourage you to keep going on those. Anything, there are frequently acronyms, so a bunch of letter soup, or anything that you've heard, you know, a developer programs in. Give everyone one more minute in case they've got anything else they'd like to add to the list. Everyone feeling good? Anyone still going?
So can I just issue a challenge? Because
Sure.
I think you did this exercise with cohort 1, and I think we came up with about 70.
We're at around 40 right now. If you guys would like to keep going, feel free to keep adding to the list. And as we go over certain ones, if something else pops in your mind, feel free to add it to the end of the list. So looking over this list and seeing what other people have added, are these some terms where you're like, oh yeah, I've heard of that before, or I don't know quite what that does, or it starts to give you this sense of like how much of there is, how many different languages and frameworks and all of those things are out there, right? And so we're going to go through and we're going to demystify all of this. So I'm going to put a row at the top of this spreadsheet, and we're going to break it out into a couple different categories. first of all, it could be a language, and a language is anything that we're using that had some syntax with it, so the program can understand how to run in the computer. Then there's the other factor of, okay, if it's a language, where is it used, right? Is this really for the database, or is this for the backend server? Is this used in mobile? Is this used on the desktop, or is this used in web? And then on top of that, we may classify something as a package or a framework. A package and a plugin are kind of similar, right? Here's some group of code that has a specified functionality that we can go pull in and say, oh, we want to use this little thing. A framework, on the other hand, is a little different. A framework is saying, we have provided you this base functionality, but instead of pulling in this little thing and using it, you're going to build on top of it, right? So think about a framework or a foundation. A framework is going to be there to kind of help you accomplish a goal. So Ruby on Rails is, well, where we'll start. And I'm just going to list out all the different categories, because these can really be used in multiple ways. And some languages span multiple target destinations as well. So I'm going to break this out into two, because Ruby on Rails is actually built on Ruby. So Ruby is a programming language. It is used primarily on desktop and web servers. And feel free to chime in here if you've got questions or you think it's something else or anything like that. And after the first one of these, you'll kind of start to get in the flow of figuring out, like, what are the options. So Ruby on Rails is actually a framework. And again, what I mean by framework is that they provide a certain base level of functionality and a recommended way of accomplishing something, and then you are able to use that framework to build on top of it. So Ruby on Rails is a framework that is primarily used for web servers. And so when you are programming using Ruby on Rails, the language you use is
Ruby.
You got it. And so we're able to start clustering these as we go through them and see how they compare and kind of how they stack up with each other. Okay, so COBOL. What is COBOL?
Language, I think.
COBOL is a language. I don't want to be rude and call it ancient, but we're going to label some of these as legacy.
I was going to say it's old.
It's used in business.
It is used in business, and that's why I don't want to call it
right.
Legacy does not mean irrelevant, and that's an important part to make. Is that there is code. The scariest of which, scariest example that I can think of is our flight control system. Our flight control system dates back to the 1970s and 80s and has never fully been shut down. So there are parts of our flight control system in every airplane that you fly in that is literally still running on tubes. And the reasoning behind that is they can't turn it off. They can't ground all flights long enough to update to this newer system. And so when I label something as legacy, that's not to say that it is outdated or not used anymore, or legacy just means that if you were to start a new project from scratch, you probably wouldn't be picking that language. However, it is still relevant, and you will find that people who are still using that language get paid huge dollars because there are so few developers left who know that language that they are stuck around to maintain them. Carolyn.
Yeah, my husband learned that years ago. It's a verbose language. It's very wordy, And I think it's computer business operation language or something like that is what I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, yeah.
It's primarily used on servers. And I'm not an expert on it, but I believe you can write desktop level applications for it. And what I mean by desktop is think about Slack, right? Slack is this huge thing to think about. But when you start breaking it down into components, well, Slack must have some web servers, right? Somewhere. I can go to slack.com and start sending messages. They've got to have a database somewhere. So they've got to be using some database server. And they also have a mobile app, and they also have a desktop app, and they have a web app. And we're actually going to go through this list and find what they're using for all of those different things. So a company isn't picking one row on this, right? They're going to kind of cherry pick based off of these different categories. So we're going to keep going on the list. What is Python?
Max, I just wanted to mention one other thing. I think that all of the problems and glitches with the unemployment system when COVID hit was because they needed to do some things with COBOL, and all of a sudden there was this demand for COBOL programmers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Legacy is not meant to be an insult. It's not to say that it's not important. It's just that if you were to start a new project today, you would be hard pressed to find a developer who goes, COBOL, that's the hot thing right now. I'm going to go use that. So I don't mean to diss legacy. There are some languages and frameworks that I wish I could call legacy and have a personal bias against. But I will try and be unbiased here and only label things legacy that are rarely used today for new projects. But Dana, that's a great example, and you're totally right. I'm sure there will be at least one other thing on this list that we'll be putting the legacy term on, and is sadly still widely used. Python. What is Python?
Language.
It is a language. And where is it used?
In gaming.
It is used in gaming. Yep.
And back-end web.
Forensic science.
It is used on desktop as well, and it can be used on web servers. I would say Python is probably the closest language to something that runs everywhere. The one place Python does not run is in the web browser. JavaScript has kind of cornered that market. And in terms of making a website interactive, JavaScript is still pretty much the only go-to programming language for that. However, Python is a language that is often frequently taught as a first programming language. It is pretty mature language, and it is definitely a popular language, and by no means is legacy. One thing I'm going to throw on this list that I don't see, has anyone heard of Django before? And Django is anyone want to take a guess? It is
movie.
It is also a movie. Yeah.
Blockchain.
It's a framework. It is primarily for websites, and it is written in Python. So let's go back up here, and we're gonna say we're gonna tag Ruby on Rails as Ruby, so we know what programming language. A framework is always utilizes a certain programming language that it pairs with, right? Because frameworks are written in that language. Okay, React Native.
Before you do that, someone had a question in the chat. Latanya said, when the government talks about improvements to infrastructure, is this part of that conversation as far as modernizing systems?
Absolutely. So a conversation that could be going on for modernizing or increasing infrastructure, any of that, would be moving off some legacy system and moving towards one that is more performant. With that said, Just because it's written in COBOL doesn't mean that it isn't fast. There are some older programming languages that run even faster than modern programming languages because they're doing less magic behind the scenes. And so just because it's an old language doesn't mean that it's a slow language. In fact, I am sure there is a language on this list that we will get to that developers cannot stand, but we still use it because it is one of the fastest programming languages available to us. And I will let someone guess if they think they know what language that is. When we get there, feel free to shout that out. So React Native, you've heard me say it before. What is it?
Framework.
It is a framework. And what is it primarily used for? What kind of device?
Web. I don't know.
React Native means
Mobile.
native for a mobile device.
Mobile device.
So it is primarily used, I'm going to say 95% of the time it is used on mobile. It can be used on web, but we will probably hit, no, we won't. We're going to add one below it called regular React. And can you guess what that is? It's also a framework, and it is primarily used, actually, it is only used on web. You wouldn't really see React being used on a mobile device by itself. Anaconda. What is it?
Language.
And it's a language.
Yeah.
It is derivative of what other programming language? Python. And what is it used for? Or where is it used? So it is derivative.
Programming.
Yeah, it's largely for data analysis.
Oh, that's all right.
It is while it is a derivative of Python, it's more closely related to R, which is a programming language specifically for data analysis and charting and graphs. It's pretty specific in that it helps. It's basically a specific version of R that makes it easier to deploy it and use it in the real world. Idle. If it helps at all, it is related to Python, but it is not anything that we've already put on the list. So we've talked about frameworks, we've talked about languages. What else does a programmer really need?
Development.
Yeah, so it's a development. I'm going to label it as a development tool. It is a code editor. So when we think about writing code, we need some program to use to put that code into. And so it is Python specific, and it runs on desktop. Java. What is Java?
Language.
It's a language. Where is it primarily used?
Desktop.
Desktop and web servers. And this is
Programming.
Almost legacy. Wow.
That could be debated. Legacy. I will label that as it's on its way out. There aren't. Java is in the top 3 in terms of beginner programming languages. Java, JavaScript, and Python are the 3 most popular ones. HTML and CSS don't necessarily count in that list because they are considered a markup language and not considered a programming language. So what we mean by that is HTML and CSS are just syntax, but there's no oomph behind it. There's no package or functions or code built into it that are helping you out. It is just a way to structure your data to have it show up a certain way. And so purists will tell you that if you know HTML and CSS, you don't really know how to program because you're just formatting things a certain way. I think that is elitist and snobist, and I have no problem saying that if you know HTML and CSS, you qualify as a programmer. But that is one argument that you will hear, is that HTML and CSS are actually markup languages. They aren't programming languages. PHP.
Language.
It's a language. It is primarily used
Web development.
web servers and development. Yep. And PHP is kind of unique in that PHP is pretty much only used on the web server. You would never run PHP to make a mobile app or a desktop app or anything like that. Can anyone name a PHP framework? One of them.
Trello?
Trello, I would categorize as a tool. They may use PHP to run their web servers, but we're thinking more in terms of things you could build on as opposed to complete solutions. So we could add Trello to the list, but I would just categorize that as a tool. So WordPress and Laravel are the two most popular PHP frameworks. And I'm going to just tag them both as PHP. And then I'm going to add Trello to the list because Trello is a very popular tool, and it primarily groups under project management. What is Elm?
Language.
And where is it used?
Web and servers.
All right. SQL. Anyone? Bonus points. What does SQL stand for?
Structured query language.
You got it.
We both got it.
Some people argue that it is standardized or standard query language, but structured query language is what I have heard the most of. So it does qualify as a language. Where is it used?
Database.
Yep, databases.
And SQL is pretty unique here in that it is SQL is very much like PHP, that you would never see SQL anywhere else other than a database. There are multiple databases that use SQL, and the whole reason SQL came to be was that there were all of these companies coming up with databases, but none of them were using the same query language. So they would be storing data in one place, and then they would go run that query on another database, and they wouldn't be able to understand the query. So structured query language dates all the way back to the 70s, where all of these companies got together and actually agreed we need one way to query the data so we can get it out.
Corey has a question.
So that's like PeopleSoft and what's that other? Those data warehouses, right? The other one I forgot.
A data warehouse is a little different than a database. A data warehouse will often use at least one database. Data warehouse is a little bit more broad of a term, but the most popular databases that you've probably heard of are Oracle SQL, Microsoft SQL, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and then there are some newer databases out there that are labeled NoSQL databases like Mongo.
Okay.
But we will definitely be covering that later on.
Okay. And this SQL was the query language used to access the data in those
yeah,
whatever.
so SQL you use for all CRUD operations. So create, read, update, delete, and you can perform all four of those actions using SQL.
Got it.
And the idea of SQL is that you can run that code on any SQL database, no matter what company is providing it, and it, in theory, should execute without any problems. There have been some variations to SQL over the years, but for the most part, once you learn SQL, that query or some very slight derivation of that query will run on whatever SQL database you run it on.
Got it. Thank you.
CSS.
Cascading style sheets.
Yes, it is. I'm going to call it
Language.
language. It is for Markdown, and it is used for websites. And I'm going to label this as in the browser, because that is one of only 3 programming languages or 3 items on this list that will actually run in the browser.
Excuse me, Max, you said markdown. How does that differ from markup?
Markup is a specific kind of markdown.
Okay.
So markup is a specific syntax. You could say that it is markdown just means that it is a specific syntax, but it has no oomph behind it. It has no other code that it is going to go call to execute.
Okay.
So your 3 markdown, your 2 markdown languages that are used in the web are HTML and CSS.
Okay.
And then there are markup and markdown. Markdown just means it is a group of kind of syntactic language.
Thank you. I just never heard it. Thank you.
No problem. HTML is a language, and we're going to continue on with the trend here. It is used for websites, and it is used in the browser. JavaScript. Who wants to step on that grenade?
Language.
It is a language. Where is it used?
Websites and mobile.
And servers and desktop and
databases.
It can be used to query a database. I'm gonna add in there with help because it's a middleman. It does need SQL eventually, but I'll leave that in there. It can pretty much run anywhere. JavaScript is similar to Python in that it can be run pretty much anywhere, but it's one of the core reasons why we're teaching that in this course. Node. What is Node?
A language.
Node isn't technically a language because it uses JavaScript. So Node is also known as Node.js. It is a framework. It is primarily run on servers, and it is primarily, well, it is written in JavaScript. Go. Guesses of what Go is?
Back-end web framework.
It is
A language, but
it is a language first and foremost. You could easily make the argument it is a framework, and it is primarily used on web servers. I'm trying to think. You could also run a Go script on a desktop computer, so I will put that in there. If anyone has anything to add, by the way, jump in if you added it to the list or if you've seen it used in other places.
Can't you use Go in like system programming too? I've heard of it in like the gaming community a lot. I think.
Yeah, Go is what is called a scripting language, in that you can write a script that kind of runs on its own without having dependencies on other files. JavaScript is another scripting language. Scripting languages are known for not needing to be compiled. And so compiled code means I wrote it in this language, and then I'm going to compile it into what is called machine code that is runnable by the computer. So scripting languages often don't require the step of compiling. And what that means is they are often able to run faster, but an argument could be made that even though it is faster to test that code and run that code, when you ship that code off and deploy the code, it may not be as fast because the compiler may be optimizing that code before the computer can run it. So I can add gaming to this list as well for Go.
So if you if I got you right, you're saying Go is a language, but it's also a framework there?
Yes. So much like Node.js is known for being the framework for running JavaScript on a server, Go is a very opinionated language, and they built a lot of the functionality that you would normally get out of a framework into the language itself.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
Go is a newer language, and it is Google's own internally used and created language, but that does not mean that Google exclusively uses Go.
Mm-hmm.
Scala.
Language.
Yep.
Web and servers, and it's used in desktop.
What does that mean?
So desktop, you mean?
Yes.
It means that it could run on your computer, either as an application or as a language to perform something on your computer. Okay. So think about any application that's down in your dock, Slack or Chrome or any of those. Those could all be made using the languages on this list that say desktop.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
Haven't heard of this one. It looks empty. Any guesses? Just kidding.
Yeah, that's a newer language. You haven't heard it yet?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, a little behind the times. Speaking
it's an
of
internet telecommunications protocol.
Oh, I put that one. We used it in first grade. I was 6 years old and we used it on like Apple IIes or something. We made the mouse move or something. It was a long.
It is a language.
I used it.
It is a language, not to date anyone, but my parents took a class in this together, and that before they were married, and they're coming up on their 40th anniversary. So I'm going to label this as primarily used in desktop because this was before web servers existed. I can confidently label this one legacy, although much like COBOL, I'm not saying that legacy means that it is not used. A lot of giant systems are still written in BASIC, and BASIC code is known for executing so quickly because it is such they call it close to the metal language, in that it doesn't do things that modern programming languages do for you today, like manage memory allocation. So BASIC, while is rarely used today, back in its day, it was one of the primary programming languages used. Vue, I'm glad to see this on the list. Vue is a
language.
It is not a language. It is actually a framework. It is written for front-end web, and it is written in JavaScript. There are three web frameworks for front-end dev work that are super popular today: React Native, Angular, and Vue. Vue is kind of considered the underdog right now, but it is popular enough to be in the top three, and therefore is something that gets mentioned today. Eiffel. Sorry, I had to look this one up. It appears to be a language. It appears to be primarily desktop focused. Mm-hmm. And based off of the dates on it and the fact that I haven't heard of it, I'm going to label it as legacy.
That's what I'm getting when I Google it too.
So just to give you an idea, because this is an important skill, the summary of Eiffel says it is an object-oriented programming language conceived in 1985.
Oh, wow.
In 2005, it became a standardized language. That's not to say that all languages created in the 80s are legacy. We will hit one on this list that is made in the 80s and still widely used and hired for today and is not legacy. However, just based off of the time period and the fact that I haven't heard of it, I'm gonna label that as legacy. The other reason I can classify it as desktop is because back in 1985, there were no other language categories, right? Everything was kind of run on desktop because the notion of web servers weren't really around or were just coming to be around at that time. So it's a good skill to be able to Google something and kind of know where that language fits in, even if it doesn't make its way onto the list. Rust.
The language.
Yeah,
Yep.
Russ. Hey, Max, how much do you know about that? Because I see on Google that it just has a stable release of only 27 days ago. So that's got to be newer, correct?
Rust is definitely a newer language. It's only been around for about 10 years or so. It is primarily used for desktop, and it is a spin-off
Of C++.
of C++. Yes.
Yep.
Angular.
A framework.
Where's it used? Front end web, and it is written in
JavaScript.
Yep. Pretty much your only option other than HTML and CSS is JavaScript for anything front end web. C#. It is a language.
Language.
It is primarily used on servers, maybe on desktop, and it is a derivative of C or C++. I can't say which one. I believe it is C, but I'll leave that on.
Wait, I'm sorry. How do you say that name again? It's because it's not C number. So
it is C#.
C#.
C,
like
C
the
sharp.
music.
Okay.
And I'll add that to the list just because C# is a pretty common programming language. I'm gonna put Microsoft on that list just so you know the company behind it. And I'll do the same for Go for Google, just so you know what companies made it popular. ASP.NET. It is a framework. It is primarily used on web servers. And it is popularized by, if I could spell Microsoft right, that would be a good thing. And it is C# based. There are, I believe there is one other language that ASP.NET supports. ASP.NET would be in the top 5 of popular web frameworks. When I say a web framework, I mean something that is either going to help you serve up a website or connect to a database or something that is going to run on a server to make your job easier to write custom code on top of. DML.
A language.
It is a language. It is used primarily in a database, and you could say it is a competitor to SQL. I'm going to leave a question mark on that one because I'm not entirely sure. I believe it is about retrieving data and manipulating data. And so it may also be closer to R than it is to SQL.
Max, I looked it up.
Yep.
It says DML, data manipulation language, is a type of SQL command that helps to retrieve and manage data in relational databases.
Okay. So we will say used with SQL. C++.
Language.
Where's it primarily used?
Servers.
Desktop and servers. C++ is also known for being extremely fast. PyCharm.
It's a developing tool.
Yep.
What does the CE in PyCharm stand for at the end?
Good question. Probably Community Edition, which means it's just a free version of the tool. But anyone can chime in there if I'm off base there. NoSQL. NoSQL is actually a category. So just like you have SQL databases, you have NoSQL databases. So I'm gonna label it as a category and then say database type. And then I'll say most popular version of this would also be Mongo. PowerShell, excuse me.
Framework, and I think that they work with Microsoft.
I'm going to label that more as a tool than it is a framework. I'll put framework down as well, but it is a terminal, and it is used by Microsoft. So PowerShell is, now I'm going back on tool.
A task automation and configuration management framework from Microsoft. That's what Google says.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you framework. It is related to the terminal. It could also be a scripting language. All of that means that it primarily is run on desktop because it requires Windows. Windows is not a popular development platform. People who are developers tend to develop on Mac and Linux a lot more. And that is primarily because the open source community is behind that, and because web servers are also a lot cheaper to run on Linux because it doesn't require licensing.
Carolyn has a question, and the CE in PyCharm CE stands for Community Edition.
Thank you. Go ahead, Carolyn.
PowerShell reminds me way back a thing called C shell. So it's uppercase C hyphen, then the word shell. And I never totally understood those and how they related, except you stay away from them if you don't know what you're doing.
So we will actually be covering pieces of that tomorrow.
Okay.
Of diving into a terminal and interacting with the computer at a script level or at a text-based level. I am going to scroll through this list and just see if there are any other major ones that jump out. Bootstrap, I'm going to label on here as a framework. It is a framework written in HTML, and it is for front-end websites. Module 3, you guys are going to be relying on Bootstrap heavily to learn how to create a website that looks pretty quickly. HTML5, I'm going to put down on here as a language. It is a markdown language, and it is used for front-end websites.
And it's W3C compliant.
And it is W3C compliant, which is a standards body that kind of regulates these languages.
World Wide Web Consortium.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Carolyn, can you repeat that? You said that was World Wide Web.
I'll throw it in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
So I will go through the rest of these languages and put some labels on them. Just so you guys can reference this down the road in case you're curious on them. Basically, the idea here is that you need to pick and choose several of these to make up what is considered your stack, right? So for a web application in particular, you're going to need several things. you're going to need your front end figured out. So your front end in web world, you have to use HTML, you have to use CSS. You have to use JavaScript. However, just because you need to use JavaScript doesn't mean you can't use a framework for JavaScript. That is where React and Angular and Vue come in. So that is a way to write your JavaScript that is going to help you write your code faster and easier. The same goes for HTML. You could write straight up HTML, or you could use a framework or an alternative language called JSX, which is what React uses, or you could pull in components, HTML components like Bootstrap. So Bootstrap and Material UI are probably the two most common HTML and CSS frameworks. Those frameworks kind of span both HTML and CSS. I'll put together a diagram of all of this just to kind of help you visualize it. In order to build a full web app, you're also going to need a backend server. So you're going to need to pick a language for your server, whether that's Python or Ruby or C# or what we're using, JavaScript. That friend that also runs in the browser, we're going to be teaching of how to create a JavaScript web server. Now you pick your framework on top of that, just like you had in the front end. So your frameworks for JavaScript are going to be Node or Express, or there are a couple other ones out there. For Python, you may have heard of Django or Flask. Ruby's primary one is going to be Ruby on Rails. And then for something like PHP, you're going to have something like WordPress or Django. So you're starting to see these things kind of cluster together. Well, you're going to need a database. Well, for your database, you're either going to use a SQL database or a NoSQL database. Okay, for your SQL databases, you're going to pick between Microsoft and Oracle or MySQL, or you're going to go to a NoSQL database like Mongo. And so when you hear someone say, what's your stack? This is normally a company-wide decision that is made that every developer, if you're in the front-end department, we use React everywhere. So that code is interchangeable. I can open up someone else's React code, understand it, and use it. And so it is somewhat mix and match, right? Is you can use React with Python, or you could use React with Ruby. Doesn't really matter. But what you're doing is you're layering these things on top of each other. And what do you get when you layer things on top of each other?
Full stack.
A stack. And if you have enough of them together, it becomes a full stack. Something that can operate on its own is what is considered that full stack option. So the stack that we are teaching at Careers in Code, and hopefully you can tie this a little bit back to the syllabus, is HTML, CSS, and React. And that's going to be our primarily our front end script, or our front end stack. And React uses JavaScript. So that's why you're going to start learning computer science fundamentals through that. Our backend server is going to use JavaScript and Node.js and a framework called Express. And then we are going to use a package, which we didn't hit on. A package is, again, that kind of standalone tool that we can pull in to use. So we're going to use a package called Sequelize, which is what allows us to write our SQL queries in JavaScript. And that package is going to be responsible for converting our JavaScript into SQL code that runs on the database. And then the database we're going to be using is called Postgres, and that is a variant of a SQL database. So I'm going to put together a diagram for you guys so all of this is documented and it's not all visual. And then I'll run through this list and tag things, either as the way I know them, or doing a quick little lookup for them on Google. I know we are over time, so you guys are all free to go, but I will hang around if anyone has questions. Before you go, quick thumbs up if you found this helpful. and an open mouth reaction if you would like to continue this conversation tomorrow. Awesome. Are you feeling like you're understanding more of this? Are you feeling like it's a little less overwhelming?
A bit, yeah. Bit.
So we will get you there. Tomorrow, we actually write our first line of code. So we're going to get your development environment set up. We're going to be sharing our screen, going through all of those steps. And then on Thursday, I'm going to talk a little bit about project management. I don't want to turn the fire hose on because project management is not the end result of this class. But it is a critical piece of you learning and making sure that all of this stuff that we're throwing at you ends up at the final end result. And that end result is going to be your capstone. So that's what you have to look forward to tomorrow and Thursday. And I will stick around if you guys have any questions. Otherwise, get out of here. It's 8:32. Ariel, you had a question?
Yeah, I already have a GitHub. Am I able to still use that previous
Absolutely.
account with this? Okay.
Absolutely.
That was it.
We'll not have to create a new account tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Good night, everyone.
I have a question. Good night, folks.
Shoot.
You said, I know you're probably tired. We can do this tomorrow if you want. But so I put in Slack on the computer. I had it on my phone, but I put it on the computer. And then it keeps making me go through the steps like I'm starting over. So I just want to set it up where I don't have to keep signing in.
When you installed Slack, did you drag it from the folder over to applications?
I did, yeah. I think the issue may be that I keep am I not supposed to eject the icon? Because I kind of have like a compulsive thing where I can't have like extra stuff on my screen. So I keep wanting to get it off.
You should be able to eject it. And then you want to make sure that when you're opening Slack, you're doing it from the applications folder, not from the downloads.
So even if I have it in my doc, I can't open it from the doc. I need to go to my applications.
So you can open it from the doc as long as the doc is pointing to the one in your applications folder.
Right.
So
Okay.
what you can do to be safe is if you right click on it in your doc, you can hit remove from doc. Then make sure the drive is ejected. Make sure you don't have like the download thing attached. And then open the applications folder and drag the Slack icon from applications back into your doc.
Okay.
And hopefully that will clear anything that is pointing to that shortcut folder and that drive. And so once you are telling it in the doc, hey, definitely open the one in applications, it should remember who you are and not keep on opening the downloaded drive.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll try that.
Getting to know a Mac is interesting. These classes are being recorded. Where do we get, is it in YouTube?
Yes. So a couple places you can find it. You can go right to YouTube and do a search for Hack Upstate, and you will find the YouTube channel there. The other place you can find it is if you go to Google Classroom under Module 1, there is a links to save post, and I have a link to our YouTube channel in there.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
All of the recorded classes will be a part of a playlist for cohort 2. So yeah, you definitely want to become familiar with that playlist.
Thank you.
If you're interested in classes from cohort 1, that's a different playlist.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. I might be. Whatever you can learn, right? Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey, LaTanya, if you continue to have problems with that, we monitor the Slack channel. So you can, I would say, because Max, look, I couldn't even picture what you were talking about. So I would say ping Max Remember, you can do screen share. And if you want him to take a look at what you're doing to help resolve, remember, you do have that at your disposal. You all can come back to Slack if it's available. You all